Dark and difficult times lie ahead. Soon we must all face the choice between what is right and what is easy.
As you guys know, on the 12th of July 2019, myself, Current Climate and Herbert Longrod travelled to Leeds to meet Marty Blagborough, Paul Lowe and Davey Human Rights. This was due to an incident which occurred in which a certain person, who shall now remain nameless, was forcibly ejected for wearing a hood whilst visiting the Compton Centre Library. Now, we were there to hold a peaceful protest and to demand answers. Unfortunately, the peace was broken by the police, allowing the security guards to go hands-on with all of us under an act of legislation which was in fact unlawful, which was Section 3 of the Criminal Law Act. This led to multiple complaints being filed with the council and with the police about the facilitation of the assaults which occurred. Yesterday, the 1st of August 2019, I received the phone call from Sergeant Dickhead. See Marty Blagborough's latest video for that, the link will be in the description, which caught me by surprise, and I was unable to record the entire call. However, the call lasted about 20 minutes and I did manage to capture about 16 minutes of it. As you can guess, it was not what we hoped for, but was what we expected. Another example of a police sergeant covering for his subordinates in order to not look bad himself. Now, I have added that audio of that conversation to this video, which is just coming up. Today, however, I also received an email from the Customer Relations team, or more specifically, Carl Sawyer from Leeds Council, yet again in a harmonious attempt to cover up the breach of our rights. They have stood by the actions of the security staff and feel that this was appropriate. After the recording of Sergeant Dickhead's call with myself is my response to this letter from Leeds Council, and I hope they find it and listen to it. So here we go with the phone call from last night with Sergeant Dickhead.
Open access to the public is classed as a public place, and that does have open access to the public. The behind the counter, which is private, is, you know, fair enough. If we'd have gone behind there, then I could quite understand them saying get out and putting their hands on. But the simple fact is, we was in there peacefully asking for answers, which we're quite within our right to do. Under the Human Rights Act, we're allowed to assemble and we're allowed to peacefully protest. We was, I can't remember the exact act that was used, but it was incorrect, because they could only use that act if they're assisting the police in making an arrest, which they were not doing. If we were doing something that was illegal, if it was aggravated trespass, for example, then the police would have been involved and they would have put hands on. The simple fact is, none of that happens. And I know you don't care. I know you're just sitting here putting up. You're probably sitting there just, you know, going yap 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 yap. But the point.
That's not true. Actually, no. I'm interested in.
The point is off. Sorry, is it Sergeant?
Yeah.
The point is, Sergeant. We was there doing a lawful activity. The Daniel, whatever his name is, I can't remember his name now. The security manager,
coordinator, manager.
He came in. He was the only one that was breaching the peace. None of us raised voices or anything like that. I was there in a private capacity. I was there to document the event. I was wearing a media jacket, which is what I do. Okay. I was the one that was doing most of the speaking, in fact, throughout the whole incident. And you can't tell me that I did or said anything there that would have caused a breach of the peace or alarm, harassment or distress to anybody. I was completely calm the whole way through, and even when I had hands put on me and I was pushed, I asked multiple times to let go. He didn't. Even when I was pushed completely off of the premises, even onto the public pavement next to the road outside the gate, he still had hands on me. That is an assault. Even if you don't want to class what happened within the boundary of the property as an assault, he had hands on me outside the property on public ground, and that was an assault. We asked your officers to do something about it. They completely ignored everything. Absolutely. We did nothing that was aggressive.
Yep.
And your officers did not even say to the security, look, calm down. I mean, you must have seen the video of the security coordinator. Did you not see his face and how angry he was?
Yeah, but I mean, I can imagine he's...
There was no need for the anger. There was no need for that anger. And he was out of control. And he's actually been in trouble before for doing exactly the same thing. But you're just saying that you're not going to do anything about it.
So I'd respectfully disagree with the way that you interpret the law on public premises.
Okay, so you disagree with that bit. What about the rest of what I've said?
Well, let's deal with it from the beginning, from my point of view, and then at least you'll understand kind of what my rationale is.
Okay.
So, it's public for some parts of legislation where you're quite right, public have access, on payment or otherwise, to get into that building. And there's a general invitation to the public: you can come into our building.
Yeah.
You can. Right. But that's not an absolute right for anybody to come into the building. So
no, that's absolutely correct.
So they've withdrawn that right for you to come into the building and ask you as a group to leave immediately. Then you haven't left, and then they've taken hold of you and they've used the minimal force possible to remove you all from the building. You made it quite clear that you're not going to leave unless force is used, and then they have used force.
That's not at all. Nobody said, from what I can remember, I certainly didn't say you have to use force to get me out of there.
Well, it's clear that you're not leaving.
Because we wanted to speak to somebody.
It's what, sorry?
Because we wanted to speak to somebody. I've been to events. I've covered events, and the police have been there, and there's been protesters sitting in the middle of the road, blocking traffic, screaming and shouting, and the police do nothing about it. And that is actually causing, they're actually causing obstruction, which is something that you can arrest them for. We weren't doing anything like that. And if you're saying that he used reasonable force because they asked us multiple times to get out and we didn't, then I'm quite within my right, surely, as I asked the security coordinator multiple times to take his hands off me while I was out on public ground. Then it can't be okay for him to ask multiple times and then put hands on, and then me asking multiple times to get his hands off me when I'm on private and not be able to do something about that.
No, taking it all into account, he is entitled to take hold of you and take you off the premises and put you outside of the premises.
I'm talking about while I was standing outside on public pathway owned by the council next to the road outside of the boundary of the library, and he had his hands on me, and I asked him multiple times to get his hands off me, and he did not.
Well, I haven't seen any of the footage where he's holding you while you're on the pavement.
Do you want to get your hand off me? Do you want to take your hand off me? Take your hand off me.
There's somewhere people are trying to get back through the gated area.
Yes, yeah.
Gate in there, standing outside the gates, and then some of you as a group, not you necessarily, come through the gates and try to push past the security basically, and they're taking hold of them.
Right.
Back outside.
Yeah.
Which again is reasonable.
Yeah. Before that, He actually pushes me outside, and there's a guy in a motorcycle helmet that then turns round afterwards and says, "You shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be putting hands on." And that is just after he's pushed me out, and I'm standing. I've turned my camera to the floor to show that I'm standing outside the boundary while he still had his hands on me.
Yeah, but if he's standing inside, then all of that force is lawful.
While I'm on,
What
hang
he's
on.
doing is
So
he's ejecting you from the premises, and he's preventing you from re-entering the premises, and that is lawful.
So if I'm standing in my house,
again, this is my opinion.
Sergeant, if I'm standing in my house and somebody comes to my door and I open the door and punch them because I'm standing on my private property, is that okay?
Well, that's not reasonable necessarily, is it? Obviously, we're talking hypothetical situations, aren't we?
Okay, so if somebody comes to my door and I say I don't want you here, and they try to push in, or they come into my property, then I push them out. Push them out, not grab hold of them and hold them out, but push them out. That's lawful. That's reasonable force. But if I then
it depends on the circumstances,
but this is the problem. It always depends on circumstances, doesn't it? And it always goes in the favour of the people who how should we say, the people that call the police first. If we'd have called the police first, the police would have come there. There'd have been more on our side. But the simple fact is, the police already knew we were coming. We know that. We already know that they knew we were coming down. Okay, so they were there within seconds of us arriving and starting to interact with the security. Okay, so straight away the police are going to be on their side. If we'd have done something wrong, the police would have got involved. They did not. They just stood by it and let it all happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that you've done anything wrong or that you've done anything illegal yourself. That's not really what I've got to decide. Well, I mean, it is. If you've done something illegal, then I would have to deal with that as well. My opinion is that you personally have not committed any offences, but you have been. At the same time, they're entitled to eject you from the property in exactly the same way as you just described. If you don't want them in your house, you're allowed to take hold of them and take them out of your house, including to the edge of your garden and onto the pavement.
But I can't then hold them on the pavement, can I?
Or you could stop them coming back into your garden.
Well, I could shut the gate, or if they then came back on the garden.
Exactly what section of pavement someone's going to get a ruler out and work out where everything is.
Well, no, but it's clear that he's got hold of me. He had one hand on me, open palmed, and the other hand, that was his right hand, and his left hand he was grabbed hold of me. Grabbed hold.
Yeah, I mean, it's to stop. My assessment is that is to stop you coming back onto the premises, and that it's lawful. And I mean, the key for us is that we would be able to prove beyond reasonable doubt that is an assault. I'm afraid my professional opinion is that we won't be able to prove in court of law that beyond reasonable doubt that that's an assault.
Okay.
So there isn't enough evidence to charge someone with that offence.
Okay. Do you think there was enough? Do you think there was enough? Do you think there was sorry, let me put it another way. Do you think there was enough evidence from the security's point of view that I was going to go back onto the property? Considering how I behaved. Considering how I behaved.
You've got to a certain extent, you have to take it as a group. And as a group, individuals within that group are pushing them back onto the property. So it's reasonable in that context to think that maybe other people from the group are going to push themselves back onto the property.
Well, as you disagreed with my interpretation earlier, I'm going to have to disagree with that. But right, okay. So obviously, this is going to be a no further action.
Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, I'm going to close the investigation at this point.
What do you think about the right to peacefully protest and the right to the right to gather, to come together? Because that seems to be in question here, doesn't it?
Well, so clearly you've got the right to peaceful assembly, and categorically the police support that, and we try and facilitate people's right to peaceful protest, and we do that. We engage with groups on a regular basis and try and help people to do that. And that's fine. Sometimes it's disruptive for people, but part of our role in the police is to facilitate that. But that doesn't mean that people don't have the right to eject people from their premises. So that's my take on that.
Right. Well, I've seen plenty of protests where people have been screaming and shouting and swearing, and police have done nothing, and then we were there.
Where people throw rocks at the police, or fireworks, or set cars on fire and roll them down towards the police. And that's clearly illegal, isn't it?
Well, this is what I'm trying to say.
Whether there's got to be a balance, isn't there? And each circumstance is different. So I can assure you that if you want to have a peaceful protest and you want to contact West Yorkshire Police, we'd work with you to try and help you have that peaceful protest smoothly. And like I say, the word we use is facilitate. So we help to advise you on how to do that without causing disruption to yourself, to other people, or to minimise that disruption.
We did that ourselves. We minimised the disruption ourselves. Somebody said that they couldn't get to the counter, so we moved away from the counter and we allowed them to get there, and that's all on video. We did nothing to interfere with anybody that was there. We stayed out of the way in an area where there was nobody else. And this is what I'm trying. This is what I'm trying to get at. There was absolutely no reason, and it is clear from the video that security coordinator was pissed off, which is the reason why he put hands on. It was no other reason other than the fact that he was made to look stupid because he couldn't get us to do what he wanted with his threats, because we'd done nothing wrong.
So my role is to decide whether or not you have a right to have a protest, or whether you had a good point, or whether or not they should have done this or you should have done that. My role is to decide whether or not an assault has taken place and whether or not we have enough evidence to bring that assault to court with a realistic chance of a successful prosecution. On that point, no.
And you're West Yorkshire Police, aren't you?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's be honest. West Yorkshire Police's track record with whether or not something is worth investigating or not is not the best, is it?
Well, I can only deal with what I've got in front of me, so not here to the best will in the world. I'm not here to have a wide discussion about what might or might not have happened in the past. Got to deal with each case that's in front of me.
Yeah, so we're always told. Right, well, then there's no point in carrying this conversation on, is there? Can I just take, what was your collar number again, please?
Yeah, 6344.
6344.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, okay, thank you very much, Sergeant.
Lovely. All right, have a good evening.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Fucking, don't slam the phone down on me, you fucking cockhead.
And now we're going to move on to the letter from Leeds Council with regards to the complaint. I'm not going to read the whole letter to you. I have picked a few pieces out. I hope that the council is watching this video and they can get this response. I will tag them in it when I post it on Twitter. Please feel free to share the video so that we can get them to see my response. So, in the letter from Leeds Council, it states that in place since 2010 to 2011, or since between 2010 and 2011, is a long-standing local agreement across a minority across a minority of community hubs, which includes the Compton Joint Service Centre, that requests that all customers accessing these sites who are wearing a hoodie are asked that they remove their hoods as they enter the site. Now, my response to that is it would be great if you could actually, or if you actually knew the date that this was implemented. But as we know, it's unlikely you'll be able to give us a date. I mean, after some research, I've been unable to uncover any such literature online that indicates any policy or any agreement to this effect. In fact, your own the Compton Centre Community Hub Guide PDF also mentions nothing, zero, about head coverings, hoodies or hats. You see, if you're going to make something up, I suggest that you at least do your homework first and ensure that what you say can be backed up. Now, you then go on to say in your toilet paper letter that this is due to a number of incidents of antisocial behaviour and knife crimes in the Hare Hills area. This local agreement allows for CCTV images to be clear and ensure the council can effectively secure the building whilst ensuring the safety of the customers and staff at all times. This local agreement is fully supported by Corporate Health and Safety, who acknowledge that this is a service consideration and make reference that any request to remove one's hoodie should be delivered in a calm and respectful manner. Now we're going to start with the obvious. What goes on outside the Compton Centre should have no effect on your operating procedure. However, I know that you're going to reply with the obvious exception that's already in the public domain, and what appears to be the only exception that's in the public domain, and that is the case of the gentleman who attended to use a computer in the centre in December 2018, but was in possession of knives. Now, understandably, this would cause concern. However, there seems to be nothing to indicate, from what I can see or find, that he was wearing a head covering, be it a hat, a hoodie, or, like in the case of some recent events in London, wearing a burqa, which appears to have happened in order to perpetrate a crime against another person. Now, you mentioned that this local agreement also allows for CCTV images to be clear and ensure the council can effectively secure the building whilst ensuring the safety of the customers and staff at all times. The wearing of a hood which covers the head but not the face is disallowed. But the wearing of a hat or a burqa, which is or can be used to obscure the face partially or entirely from cameras, is perfectly fine. Now, this makes about as much sense as an ashtray on a motorcycle or a chocolate fucking teapot. I would also like to point out that your agreement is to request the removal of hoods, as stated many times in the video, the initial video, where the chap was asked to leave because he had his hood up. And that was by 2 security staff and also 2 members of actual Compton Library staff, who all mention the word request, request, request. So this local government, or this local agreement, is not a policy rather than a simple request. This is a reasonable conclusion, I fear, based on the several mentions of it being a request and also the distinct lack of any mention of it in any document available online. And seeing as it's apparently an agreement which affects the users of your centres, then one would assume that the users of your facilities would have a right to know. Now that's just a thought. You then go on to say that any request to remove one's hoodie should be delivered in a calm and respectful manner. But you do realise that just by saying please a few times mixed in with demands does not make them calm and respectful requests. And by the way, you have just said it yourself in your very own words. Any requests to remove one's hoodie, any requests. And by definition, dictionary definition, a request is an act of asking politely or formally for something. And the definition of asking is say something in order to obtain an answer or some information. And I see nothing there that would indicate that this is law or policy. Requesting, which means asking, there is nothing within that that indicates it's a law or policy, or in fact that anyone has to obey for that matter. The next part of your toilet paper goes on to say, from a legal perspective, there is no law that says people covering their heads for faith reasons can't be asked to uncover them, especially if it is for identity or security purposes. But what you have no doubt intentionally omitted from this sentence is that there is also no law that says anyone has to comply with that request, whether it's being worn for religious reasons or not. You say it is of your opinion, okay, an opinion, and let's remember that opinions are like arseholes. It is of your opinion the young adult was requested, there's that word again, to take down his hoodie on multiple occasions by the security guards, but continued to refuse this polite request and did so in an aggressive and intimidating manner. Now, I am concerned as to which footage you were viewing, as the footage available online, in my opinion, seeing as we're basing things on opinion, did not show any aggressive or intimidating manner from the young adult, as you put it. Unfortunately, this now seems to be the go-to cause for everyone who tries to lie their way out of a situation these days. But it was in fact the security guards who were 2 against 1. The security guards who were constantly closing the gap on the individual, and the security guards who called for backup and threatened to go hands-on. Now these, as you're clearly unaware, are the actions of intimidation and aggression. You may also be interested to know that Danny Hudson, your security coordinator, has been a person of interest of a police investigation in the past, where he was arrested for assault whilst working at the Leeds Infirmary. And surprise, surprise, the council and the police managed to escape any complaint on that occasion too, based on not enough evidence. Now, my final point before the rest of your letter quite frankly bores me to tears, you state that during the second incident on the 12th of July, when multiple protesters attended the building, our security staff acted on West Yorkshire Police's advice before asking them to leave. It is also on record that the police were satisfied with the proportionate force used to remove them. Now, I wonder, Leeds City Council, I wonder where you stand, or if you stand by the legislation set out in the Criminal Justice and Courts Act 2015, whereby it states that a police constable listed in subsection 3 commits an offence if he or she exercises the powers and privileges of a constable improperly and knows or ought to know that the exercise is improper. Seeing as you have clearly stated that your security staff acted on West Yorkshire Police's advice when they advised your security staff to improperly use section 3 of the 1967 Criminal Law Act, which states that use of force in making arrests, etc. Number 1, a person may use such force as is reasonable in the circumstances in the prevention of a crime, or in effecting or assisting in the lawful arrest of offenders or suspected offenders or of persons unlawfully at large. And considering there was no crime being committed or about to be committed by us, hence why the police themselves did not take any action, and the fact that none of the attendees were under arrest or unlawfully at large, this would indicate that you have now shifted the blame from your own security staff and yourself, and have yourself implicated the police officers as being in breach of Section 26 of the Criminal Justice and Courts Act 2015, whereby they commit an offence if he or she exercises those powers and privileges of a constable improperly and ought to know or knows that the exercise is improper. So your admission of the fact that the police were to blame for the misuse of the law, which caused multiple members of the public to be assaulted and a breach of the peace to occur against several people who were quite within their rights to be doing what they were doing under not only our inalienable rights, but also those rights that have been cemented in the Human Rights Act and by the EHRC, which are Article 10, freedom of expression, and Article 11, freedom of assembly. So, as a council, this would look pretty bad, wouldn't it? Now, I'd like to think I've covered all of your poorly investigated so-called report, so I'm going to leave it there before I go and use the paper to wipe my arse. Except, just one last thing. Leeds Council, you may well think that because you are a council and you clearly have the protection and resources of a corrupt and, let's face it, pathetic excuse of a police force to help you squirm out of potential complaints, you will soon see the results of your actions. More and more people are aware of the path that the councils and police and other faces of the establishment are trying to force and impose on us. This will not last, I can promise you that. Your actions, your blind following without question, is going to create some very dark days for yourselves and the police, and there will be no escape. Everyone will know who you are, and everyone will be looking to you for remedy because the establishment uses you as their puppets and their shield, their scapegoats, so that they can blame you and throw you to the lions when the shit hits the fan. You don't see it yet, but you will soon. And I suggest you start thinking for yourselves before it's too late.
Good night, all.